Hi everybody, this is Nick Pavlov and I welcome you to our channel where we talk about things related to Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. I've decided to make a series of short, bite-sized tutorials on the use of DAX. Using my own experience learning DAX, as someone with the Excel background, I'll try to digest and explain the logic behind most commonly used DAX formulas. There are over 250 functions in DAX, but we're going to go over the top 25 to 30 of these functions and look at common use cases and practical examples. The reality is that 90% of the time, you will only use these 25 functions. Now, without further details, let's get started. Now, in this first video, we will take a look at aggregation functions, which are SUM, AVERAGEX, SUMX, average, minimum, and maximum. Now, before I start, I quickly wanted to talk about the difference between implicit and explicit measures. There are two types of measures in Power BI, implicit and explicit. Implicit measures are automatically created when you drag a numeric column into a visual. So here, for example, I have a table with my month, I have a slicer for a year, I went to the fact sales table and I dragged the sales quantity column. And that shows me the sum of my quantity. I can click to this little arrow and I can select basic calculations like sum, average, minimum, count, etc. So an implicit measure can do basic aggregations without a defined DAX formula, but they are limited to the specific visual and are not reusable. Now we are going to focus on explicit measures. This is a best practice in Power BI to manually create measures using DAX. The explicit measures can be defined once and then reused across multiple calculations, visuals, and reports. The explicit measures allow for complex calculations and provide better control over analysis. So the simple way to understand the difference is when you have to write a DAX formula to create a measure, then that measure is always explicit. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead with the first measure, and it's sum. I already have this function right here. Let me make it larger. The function sum is super easy. This function basically sums up all the numbers in a selected column. So what I do is I will indicate a column and a table. So if I go to the table view right here and I go to my fact sales table, I can see that there's a column called sales quantity. And so what the function sum does, it goes and sums all of the values, all of the numeric values in this column. And so then I can see all of these numbers. This is actually an implicit measure. So as I said, I'm going to remove it and I'm going to add the explicit measure for total sales. All right, to sum up, no pun intended, the sum function, you will use that all the time if you want to find the total of numerical values, such as total units in our example here, or for example, total sales amount. Now, speaking of total sales amount, if I go back to the table view, I can see that I don't have a separate column for sales amount. Now, you may ask, how do we calculate the total sales then? And the answer is the next function, which is called SUMX. The function SUMX adds up the results of an expression calculated for each row in a table. So you can do row by row calculation and then sum up all of that. Let me show you. So I'm going to go here and I will create a new measure, which I'm going to call total sales. And that's going to be SUMX. And in the first part, I will indicate the table which is going to be used. So that's fact sales. And now the expression here is going to be, I have two columns there. I have a column called unit price and I have a column called quantity. So if I want to know the sales amount, I can multiply price by quantity. And that's going to show me revenue. So let's go ahead. Unit price multiplied by quantity. Fact sales, sales quantity. So I'll create this measure. I'm going to add it to my table. format it properly with 0 decimals to save space. And here is my total sales. Let me open the Excel file here and explain the logic here. SUMX, think about the logic of SUMX as if it has 2 steps. Step number 1, which is the iterative part, it goes row by row. And in our example, we have quantity and price, right? So we're going to go row by row, and we're going to multiply quantity by price. Okay? So this is what the engine is doing behind the scenes. So for each row, I will calculate the sales amount. So it goes for each row. That's step number 1. And step number 2, the sum part, is the formula will then sum the totals of each row. And then we're going to have this number. I mean, this is an example, but in our Power BI, we will have this large number. Now, the next function we're going to look at is called average. It's super simple. So let's create the function called average. I'm going to be using the price column for that. And that's going to be average price. And the function is average. And here I need to select for which column I would like to calculate average. So that's going to be price for the fact sales table, just like that. And the logic behind the code is simple, right? The function adds up all the prices in the price column and then divides it by the number of products. And then we get the average. Let's do 0 decimals. So the average price for all of these months is such. Now let's take a look at the average X. This has X in the end, so we know that is similar to SUMX. This is an iterative function. So to show you this, what I'm going to do is I will actually remove the month and let me put the product category name. Okay, so I have all kinds of different products here. To show you the average X, let me calculate the average revenue per sale. So that would be average revenue per sale. And here we're going to use average X. Again, we're going to show the table. So that's fact sales table. And the expression is similar to SUMX. We will be multiplying price, unit price, multiplied by quantity. And so when we do that, add this to my table, format the measure properly with 0 decimals. Okay, and so this code will calculate the revenue for each sale and then calculate the average of these revenues across all sales. In our example, we have calculated the average revenue per product. You'll be using average X if you want to calculate, sales per product or cost per customer, that kind of stuff, where you want to divide and see what different categories, what averages these categories have. And lastly, let's take a look at the minimum and maximum. These functions are pretty easy. They will find the smallest and the largest number in a column. So let's create both of these measures. Let's find out lowest price, and that's going to be minimum. Simple as that, and you basically just indicate the column. And that's unit price from my fact table. And let me add that to my table. And here I have it, okay? If I want to calculate the highest price, then I can use max. And that's also going to be the unit price column from the fact table. And then I'll add it to my table. And here's the highest price for this category. So the minimum will look through all the prices in the price column and give you the smallest number. And the function max will do the opposite. It gives you the largest number in the column. All right, so these are 6 basic aggregation functions in DAX. Thanks for your attention. Hopefully this was helpful, and in the next video we'll continue with some more basic DAX functions. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help, and let's connect.